did not seem to function in the light. There was a much more incredible explanation of her presence, but he was not to know it for a few minutes yet. "Come along," he said, taking the clutching hands gently from his shoulders. "I'll lead you to the well." She sighed in a deep gust of relief and dropped her compelling eyes from his, murmuring in that strange gabbling tongue what must have been thanks. He took her by the hand and turned toward the ruined archway of the door. Against his fingers her flesh was cool and firm. To the touch she was tangible, but even thus near his eyes refused to focus upon the cloudy opacity of her body, the dark blur of her streaming hair. Nothing but those burning, blinded eyes were strong enough to pierce the veil that parted them. She stumbled along at his side over the rough floor of the temple, saying nothing more, panting with eagerness to return to her incomprehensible tree. How much of that eagerness was assumed, Smith still could not be quite sure. When they reached the door, he halted her for a moment, scanning the sky for danger. Apparently the ships had finished with this quarter of the city, for he could see 2 or 3 of them half a mile away, hovering low over Illar's northern section. He could risk it without much peril. He led the girl cautiously out into the sun-hot court. She could not have known by sight that they neared the well, but when they were within 20 paces of it, she flung up her blurred head suddenly and tugged at his hand. It was she who led him that last stretch which parted the two from the well. In the sun, the shadow tracery of the grille's symbolic pattern lay vividly outlined on the ground. The girl gave a little gasp of delight. She dropped his hand and ran forward 3 short steps, and plunged into the very center of that shadowy pattern on the ground. And what happened then was too incredible to believe. The pattern ran over her like a garment, curving to the curve of her body in the way all shadows do. But as she stood there, striped and laced with the darkness of it, there came a queer shifting in the lines of black tracery, a subtle, inexplicable movement to one side, and with that motion she vanished. It was exactly as if that shifting had moved her out of one world into another. Stupidly, Smith stared at the spot from which she had disappeared. Then several things happened almost simultaneously. The zoom of a plane broke suddenly into the quiet. A black shadow dipped low over the rooftops, and Smith, too late, realized that he stood defenseless in full view of the searching ships. There was only one way out, and that was too fantastic to put faith in. But he had no time to hesitate. With one leap he plunged full into the midst of the shadow of the Tree of Life. Its tracery flowed around him, molding its pattern to his body, and outside the boundaries everything executed a queer little sideways dip and slipped in the most extraordinary manner, like an optical illusion, into quite another scene. There was no intervention of blankness. It was as if he looked through the bars of a grill upon a picture which without warning slipped sideways, while between the bars appeared another scene, a curious dim landscape, gray as if with the twilight of early evening. The air had an oddly thickened look, through which he saw the quiet trees and the flower-spangled grass of the place with a queer, unreal blending, like the landscape in a tapestry, all its outlines blurred. In the midst of this tapestried twilight, the burning whiteness of the girl he had followed blazed like a flame. She had paused a few steps away and stood waiting, apparently quite sure that he would come after. He grinned a little to himself as he realized it, knowing that curiosity must almost certainly have driven him in her wake, even if the necessity for shelter had not compelled his following. She was clearly visible now, in this thickened dimness, visible and very lovely, and a little unreal. She shone with a burning clarity, the only vivid thing in the whole twilight world. Eyes upon that blazing whiteness, Smith stepped forward, scarcely realizing that he had moved. Slowly he crossed the dark grass toward her. That grass was soft underfoot and thick with small, low-blooming flowers of a shining pallor. Botticelli painted such spangled swards for the feet of his angels. Upon it the girl's bare feet gleamed whiter than the blossoms. She wore no garment but the royal mantle of her hair sweeping about her in a cloak of shining darkness that had a queer, unreal tinge of purple in that low light. It brushed her ankles in its fabulous length. From the hood of it she watched Smith coming toward her, a smile on her pale mouth and a light blazing in the deeps of her moonstone eyes. She was not blind now, nor frightened. She stretched out her hand to him confidently. "It's my turn now to lead you," she smiled. As before, the words were gibberish, but the penetrating stare of those strange white eyes gave them a meaning in the depths of his brain. Automatically his hand went out to hers. He was a little dazed, and her eyes were very compelling. Her fingers twined in his, and she set off over the flowery grass, pulling him beside her. He did not ask where they were going, lost in the dreamy spell of the still, gray, enchanted place. He felt no need for words. He was beginning to see more clearly in the odd, blurring twilight that ran the outlines of things together in that queer tapestried manner. And he puzzled in a futile, muddled way as he went on over what sort of land he had come into. Overhead was darkness, paling into twilight near the ground, so that when he looked up he was staring into bottomless deeps of starless night. Trees and flowering shrubs and the flower-starred grass stretched emptily about them in the thick, confusing gloom of the place. He could see only a little distance through that dim air. It was as if they walked a strip of tapestried twilight in some unlighted dream. And the girl, with her lovely, luminous body and rich colored robe of hair, was like a woman in a tapestry, too, unreal and magical. After a while, when he had become a little adjusted to the queerness of the whole scene, he began to notice furtive movements in the shrubs and trees they passed. Things flickered too swiftly for him to catch their outlines, but from the tail of his eye he was aware of motion, and somehow of eyes that watched. That sensation was a familiar one to him, and he kept an uneasy gaze on those shiftings in the shrubbery as they went on. Presently he caught a watcher in full view between bush and tree, and saw that it was a man, a little, furtive, dark-skinned man, who dodged hastily back into cover again before Smith's eyes could do more than take in the fact of his existence. After that he knew what to expect, and could make them out more easily. Little darting people with big eyes that shone with a queer, sorrowful darkness from their small, frightened faces as they scuttled through the bushes, dodging always just out of plain sight among the leaves. He could hear the soft rustle of their passage, and once or twice when they passed near a clump of shrubbery he thought he caught the echo of little whispering calls, gentle as the rustle of leaves, and somehow full of a strange warning note, so clear that he caught it even amid the murmur of their speech. Warning calls, and little furtive hiders in the leaves, and a landscape of tapestried blurring, carpeted with Botticelli flower-strewn sward. It was all a dream, he felt quite sure of that. It was a long while before curiosity awakened in him sufficiently to make him break the stillness, but at last he asked dreamily, "Where are we going?" The girl seemed to understand that without the necessity of her bond her hypnotic eyes made, for she turned and caught his eyes in a white stare, and answered, "To Thag. Thag desires you." "What is Thag?" In answer to that she launched, without preliminary, upon a little sing-song monologue of explanation, whose stereotyped formula made him faintly uneasy with the thought that it must have been made very often to attain the status of a set speech, made to many men, perhaps, whom Thag had desired. And what became of them afterward, he wondered. But the girl was speaking. "Many ages ago there dwelt in Illar the great King Illar, for whom the city was named. He was a magician of mighty power, but not mighty enough to fulfill all his ambitions. So by his arts he called up out of the darkness the being known as Thag, and with him struck a bargain. By that bargain Thag was to give of his limitless power, serving Illar all the days of Illar's life. And in return the king was to create a land for Thag's dwelling place, and people it with slaves and